Star Wars, Echoes of the Outer Rim. Prologue, The Ghost in the Machine. The blackness of the Krolute Nebula was not empty. It was a void filled with whispers, a graveyard of forgotten battles and derelict ambitions. Within this cosmic dust, where stellar winds sang a mournful dirge, drifted the husk of Architon's class light cruiser. Its name, the Resolute Spirit, was a cruel joke, scraped and scarred by laser fire, its hull pitted by microasteroids. It was a ghost, and aboard it, another ghost was stirring. Kaelen stirred from his cryosleep, the thawing process a painful return to consciousness. The pod hissed open, spilling his shivering form onto the cold deck. His muscles screamed in protest, his mind a fog of fractured memories. The last clear thing was the alarm, the shriek of proximity alerts, the shudder of a direct hit, the frantic orders of Captain Voss, then nothing. He pushed himself up, his boots echoing in the sepulchral silence of the medbay. The emergency lights cast a sickly red glow, painting long, dancing shadows that seemed to mock him. He was alone. The ship's hum, usually a comforting constant, was gone, replaced by the intermittent groan of straining metal and the faint, desperate ping of a damaged transponder. "Hello," he called out, his voice hoarse. The word was swallowed by the silence. He was a communications officer, a junior lieutenant in the service of the New Republic. His war had been one of data streams and encrypted channels, not blaster bolts and dogfights. He was a slicer, a whisperer of machines, and the silence of this one was terrifying. Making his way to the bridge was a journey through a tomb. Frozen corpses, crewmates he had shared meals with just cycles ago, were strapped into their stations, their faces locked in final moments of terror or resignation. He found Captain Voss in his command chair, a blackened hole in his chest, his eyes staring at the static-filled viewport. Kaelen's stomach lurched. He stumbled to his station, his fingers flying across the console. Power was at 3%. Life support was failing, cycling the same stale air for... He checked the chrono. 5 standard years. He had been asleep, adrift for 5 years. A new priority alert flashed on his screen. It wasn't a ship system. It was a data packet, heavily encrypted, marked with the personal seal of Captain Voss and tagged with the highest security clearance. The subject line was a single, cryptic word, Eidolon. Driven by a desperate need for purpose, for a reason why he had survived, Kaelen began to slice. The encryption was brutal, a multi-layered beast of New Republic and something else, something older, more malevolent. Imperial. It took him hours, his world narrowing to the flow of code, the dance of decryption algorithms. Finally, the packet opened. It was not a distress call. It was a confession. Voss's voice, strained and hurried, filled his helmet. "If you are hearing this, then I am dead, and the spirit is lost. We were not on a mapping mission. That was a cover. Our orders came from a faction within New Republic intelligence. A faction that believes the war is not over. They tasked us with finding the Eidolon." A hollow image flickered into life. A sleek, dagger-like starship of a design Kaelen had never seen. It was all sharp angles and predatory grace, a blend of imperial engineering and something other. The Eidolon was an experimental project, Voss continued, a joint venture between Imperial remnant warlords and a Sith cult that operated in the shadows long before Palpatine. They called it a resonance weapon. It doesn't destroy cities or fleets. It targets the Force itself. It creates a dead zone, a null field where the Force cannot be touched, cannot be felt. It doesn't kill Jedi. It makes them ordinary. It makes them nothing. Kaelen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the failing life support. A weapon against the Force itself. It was heresy. It was blasphemy. on a cosmic scale. We found it. Voss's voice was a whisper now, filled with dread. Docked at a hidden research facility in the Helska system. But we were discovered. An Imperial patrol, the 471st, loyal to the warlord Moff Valerius, engaged us. We managed to flee, but they crippled us, sent us drifting into the nebula. They think we're dead. They must think we're dead. The data we downloaded, it's incomplete, but it's enough. The Eidolon is operational. Valerius has it. He's hiding, building his forces. He plans to use it to decapitate the New Republic by striking at Luke Skywalker's new Jedi Academy. You must get this data to the proper authorities, not to my contacts in intelligence. They are compromised. I fear they wanted the weapon for themselves. Find someone you can trust. Find a Jedi. The transmission ended. Kaelen sat in the oppressive silence, the weight of the galaxy settling on his shoulders. He was a communications officer, a nobody, and he was now the sole bearer of a secret that could shatter the fragile peace of the New Republic and doom the Jedi to oblivion. He had one chance, the Spirit's sole remaining escape pod, a cramped short-range vessel, and the transponder's last log signal, a faint repeating beacon from a remote trading outpost on the edge of the Outer Rim. A wretched hive of scum and villainy, if ever there was one. Port Talon. His mission was clear. Survive. Get to Port Talon. Find a way to contact a Jedi. And pray he wasn't too late. Part 1. The Smuggler's Price. Port Talon wasn't so much a port as a cancerous growth on the side of a barren asteroid. Its docking bays were open to the vacuum, its corridors filled with the thick smell of recycled air, engine coolant, and unwashed bodies. Species of every imaginable shape and size jostled in its markets, their dealings a symphony of hissed negotiations and the clatter of cred chips. It was a place where anonymity was the only currency that mattered. Kaelen, wearing a stained flight suit, scavenged from the Spirit, and with a blaster pistol he barely knew how to use strapped to his thigh, felt more exposed than he ever had in the silent tomb of his ship. The data chip containing Voss's confession and the Eidolon files felt like a burning coal in his pocket. His first goal was information. He needed to find a ship, a pilot willing to take him to the core, no questions asked. His credits were limited. What he'd scavenged from the Spirit's safe wouldn't last long in a place like this. He found his way to the most raucous cantina in the port, a place called the Rusty Hydrant. The air was thick with smoke and the wail of a jizz band. He slid into a corner booth, his eyes scanning the crowd. He saw smugglers with weathered faces and quick eyes, bounty hunters clad in durasteel and menace, and low-level gangsters making shady deals in shadowy alcoves. He was about to approach a Wiki who looked like he'd seen his share of hyperspace lanes when a voice smooth as silk and sharp as a vibroblade cut through the din. You look lost, friend, and that's a dangerous thing to be in Port Talon. Kaelen turned. A woman stood by his table, leaning against the grimy wall. She was human, or near human, with sharp, intelligent features, dark hair pulled back in a practical braid, and eyes the color of polished durasteel that missed nothing. She wore a worn leather flight jacket over practical cargo pants, and a heavy blaster pistol sat comfortably on her hip. She carried herself with the easy confidence of someone who knew how to handle trouble. I'm not lost, Kaelen said, trying to sound tougher than he felt. I'm shopping. For what? A one-way trip to a spice den? She asked, a faint smirk playing on her lips. You have New Republic written all over you, and not the fun, blaster-happy part, the pushing, flimsy part. Your boots are too clean. Kaelen's heart hammered against his ribs. He'd been made in under a minute. I need passage, he said, dropping the pretense, to the core systems, Coruscant, if possible. The woman let out a short, humorless laugh. Coruscant? That's a long, expensive trip. What's in it for me? I can pay, within reason. Credits are good, but goodwill is better. And you, my clean-booted friend, look like a whole lot of trouble. Her eyes narrowed. What's your name? Kaelen. I'm Lyra, Captain Lyra Vance of the Stargazer's Promise. She gestured vaguely towards the docking bay. She's not much to look at, but she's fast, and her hyperdrive is temperamental, but reliable. Now, why does a New Republic officer, clearly out of his depth, need to get to Coruscant in a hurry without using official channels? Kaelen hesitated. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, but he was out of options. I have information, time sensitive. It needs to reach the right people. The right people? Lyra's smirk returned. Honey, in this galaxy, there are no right people. There's just people who pay you and people who shoot at you. Sometimes they're the same. She studied him for a long moment, her gaze piercing. Fine. I'll take you as far as Denon. It's a core world, plenty of traffic to Coruscant. You can find your right people from there. Cost you 5,000 credits. Half now, half on delivery. It was almost all he had, but it was his only shot. Deal. As Kaelen handed over the cred chips, a commotion erupted at the cantina's entrance. 4 figures, clad in the distinctive gray and black armor of the Imperial Remnant, marched in. Their leader, a tall man with a cruel scar running down his cheek, scanned the room, his eyes locked onto Kaelen. There, the one from the derelict, he barked, his voice amplified by his helmet's vocoder. Take him, alive. Kaelen froze. How? How had they found him so fast? Lyra didn't hesitate. In one fluid motion, she drew her blaster, set it to stun, and dropped the first 2 stormtroopers with precise shots to the chest. She grabbed Kaelen's arm, her grip like durasteel. Time to go, she yelled, shoving him towards the back exit. Looks like your information has friends. They burst out into a crowded market street, blaster bolts sizzling past their heads. Lyra moved like a phantom, weaving through stalls and knocking over crates to slow their pursuers. The Promise! Docking Bay 7! She shouted, returning fire without breaking stride. Don't stop running! They sprinted through the chaotic port, the stormtroopers and their scarred commander close behind. Kaelen's lungs burned, his mind racing. The Imperials knew he was alive. They knew he had the data. Voss's warning about compromised New Republic intelligence echoed in his mind. Had they sold him out? Or had the Imperials tracked the escape pod's trajectory? They reached Docking Bay 7. The Stargazer's Promise was a Corellian YT-2400 light freighter, a cousin to the more famous YT-1300. It was scuffed and dented, with mismatched hull plates, but it looked space-worthy. R3, get the engines hot, now! Lyra yelled as she slapped the access panel. The ramp descended with a protesting whine. They scrambled aboard as blaster bolts sparked against the hull. Lyra hit the ramp closure and sprinted for the cockpit. Kaelen stumbled after her, collapsing into the co-pilot's chair. Lyra's hands flew across the console. Hang on, this is gonna be rough. The Promise lifted off with a lurch, engines roaring. She spun the ship, ignoring the frantic traffic control signals, and shot out of the docking bay like a proton from a torpedo launcher. Through the viewport, Kaelen saw a Gazanti-class cruiser, its bay doors opening, TIE fighters beginning to pour out. They brought a friend, Lyra muttered, shoving the throttle forward. R3, plot a jump to the Denon system. Any random vector, just get us out of here. The astromech droid, a blue and white R3 unit, whistled a frantic affirmative from its socket. The Promise shuddered as laser cannon fire streaked past. Lyra threw the ship into a violent evasive maneuver, diving towards the asteroid field that surrounded the port. They're jamming our hyperspace trajectory, R3 beeped. Of course they are, Lyra snarled. Kaelen, get to the ventral gun turret. Maybe you can earn your passage. Kaelen's blood ran cold. I'm not a gunner. There's a first time for everything. Go! Stumbling through the ship's cluttered interior, Kaelen found the ladder to the lower turret. He dropped into the seat, his hands gripping the controls. A targeting reticle appeared in the viewport. Outside, the asteroids were a blur, and the agile TIE fighters were closing in. He squeezed the triggers. Bolts of green energy lanced out, wildly inaccurate, disappearing into the void. A TIE swooped in, its own lasers stitching a line of fire across the Promise's hull. The ship rocked violently. He was going to get them killed. He took a deep breath, forcing down the panic. He was a slicer. He thought in patterns, in code. A TIE's movement was just an algorithm, a predictable set of physics. He tracked one, leading it slightly, and fired. A burst of fire caught the TIE's solar panel. It spun out of control and smashed into a nearby asteroid, exploding in a silent flower of flame. A whoop of triumph came over the comm from the cockpit. Hey, you can shoot. Now do it 5 more times. Emboldened, Kaelen targeted another. He missed and missed again, but he was getting closer. He was learning. He managed to clip a second TIE, sending it spiraling away damaged. Hyperspace is calculating, Lyra shouted. R3, on my mark! The Gozanti cruiser fired its ion cannons. A wave of blue energy washed over the Promise. The lights flickered, and the engine sputtered. They hit the motivator, Lyra cursed. We're losing power! Kaelen saw their chance slipping away. He targeted the Gozanti's bridge, pouring laser fire into it. It was a futile gesture, like throwing pebbles at a rancor, but it forced the cruiser to adjust its course. That's it! Got the lock! Lyra yelled. Punch it! With a final, shuddering groan, the Stargazer's Promise leaped into the swirling blue tunnel of hyperspace, leaving Port Talon and its Imperial hunters behind. Kaelen climbed out of the turret, his body trembling with adrenaline. He found Lyra in the cockpit, leaning back in her chair, a grim expression on her face. Okay, Kaelen, she said, her voice low and serious. The no questions part of our deal is over. You almost got me killed back there. Who are you and what is this information that has Moff Valerius's personal guards so interested? Kaelen met her steely gaze. He was in it now, for better or worse. And he had a feeling he would need a smuggler like Lyra Vance a lot more than he would need a ticket to dinner. It's not information, he said quietly, pulling the data chip from his pocket. It's a warning about a weapon that can kill the Force. Lyra stared at him, her smirk gone, replaced by a look of profound disbelief. You're crazy. Maybe, Kaelen said, but the Imperials chasing us aren't, and if we don't do something, the Jedi are finished. Part 2, the Jedi in the Storm. The journey to Denon would take several standard cycles. The Promise's hyperdrive, true to Lyra's word, was temperamental, requiring constant monitoring by R3. The Ion Blast had also damaged the long-range transceiver, isolating them from the galactic holonet. This left Kaelen and Lyra with nothing but time and a galaxy-shattering secret between them. Kaelen played Voss's log for her. Lyra listened in silence, her face an unreadable mask. When it ended, she got up, poured 2 glasses of Corellian whiskey, and handed one to Kaelen. The Force, she said, taking a long sip. I've seen some weird stuff in my time. Fought alongside a Twi'lek who claimed she could sense a trap before it sprung. Met an old Iktachi on Nar Shaddaa who could tell your future for a credit. But this, a weapon that just erases it? She shook her head. It's like trying to imagine a weapon that kills sound. It doesn't make sense. According to the data, it doesn't erase the Force itself, Kaelen explained, calling up schematics on a datapad. That's impossible. The Force is an energy field that binds the galaxy together. The Eidolon creates a localized dissonance field, a cacophony that overwhelms and neutralizes the connection a Force-sensitive being has to it. It's like using a loud noise to drown out a specific frequency. To a Jedi within the field, the Force would simply go silent. So it turns their greatest weapon into a useless hunk of junk, Lyra mused. Efficient and utterly terrifying. She leaned forward. So what's the plan, Lieutenant? We get to Denon, you walk into the nearest New Republic office and hand this over? After what your captain said about compromised intelligence. I don't know, Kaelen admitted. Voss said to find a Jedi. But how? They're not exactly listed in the public directory. There's a place, Lyra said slowly. A cantina on the lower levels of Denon. It's called the Silent Shadow. It's a neutral ground. Spies, information brokers, fringe elements, and sometimes people look for those who are gifted. If there's a Jedi on Denon, or someone who can get a message to one, that's where we'll find them. Denon was Coruscant's poorer, grittier cousin, an entire planet encased in a single, sprawling ecumenopolis. The Stargazers' promise descended through layers of smog and traffic, finally settling in a massive, grimy public spaceport on the 423rd level. The air was thick with industrial exhaust and the incessant hum of speeder traffic. The Silent Shadow was exactly as Lyra had described, a dimly lit hole in the wall where conversations were hushed and eyes held a perpetual suspicion. Lyra took the lead, her hand never far from her blaster. She approached the bartender, a surly Deveronian, and slid a cred chip across the counter. I'm looking for a guide, she said quietly. Someone who can help a friend find the path to enlightenment. The Deveronian's eyes flicked from Lyra to Kaelen. He pocketed the chip. Enlightenment is expensive and dangerous. Wait in the back booth. A man will come. They did as instructed, the sticky synth leather booth groaning under their weight. An hour passed, then a figure slid into the booth opposite them. He was a Nautolan, his green skin marked with faint tattoos, his large black eyes reflecting the dim light. He wore simple, rugged robes. You seek a teacher, he said, his voice a deep, watery baritone. We seek a Jedi, Kaelen said, his voice barely a whisper. The Nautolan's head tendrils twitched slightly. The Jedi are a myth, a story for children. The Empire didn't think so, Lyra countered, and neither does Moff Valerius. At the mention of the name, the Nautolan went very still. His gaze intensified, seeming to look right through them. Kaelen felt a strange sensation, a gentle pressure at the back of his mind like a soft knock on a door. It wasn't intrusive, just inquiring. You carry a great shadow with you, the Nautolan said finally, a silence that screams. My name is Kothan Var. I am a seeker of truths. What is this shadow? Kaelen told him. He told him of the resolute spirit, of Voss's confession, of the Eidolon. As he spoke, Koth's expression grew graver and graver. The Eidolon, Koth breathed, his tendrils coiling with clear agitation. The project was rumored to have been lost with the destruction of the Helska facility. If Valerius has completed it, he looked at them, his large eyes filled with a grim resolve. You were right to be wary of official channels. The shadow of the Empire is long, and its agents are everywhere. I cannot face this threat alone. We must go to Ossus. Ossus? Kaelen asked. The site of Master Luke Skywalker's new Jedi Praxium, Koth explained. It is the only place where this warning will be heard and believed, and it is the only place where we can find the strength to counter it. Their plan was set, but as they left the Silent Shadow, Kaelen felt it again, the prickling sensation of being watched. He glanced up at a surveillance cam, its red light blinking steadily. He was a slicer. He knew a data stream when he saw one, and he had a terrible feeling their message had just been intercepted. Their journey to the spaceport was a tense, hurried affair. Koth moved with a preternatural grace, his senses seemingly alert to every danger. He was no Jedi master, he explained, but a Jedi ranger, one of the few survivors of the Purge who had operated alone in the Outer Rim, a guardian of the forgotten and the lost. He had felt a disturbance in the force around them, a void that had drawn him to the silent shadow. They were just within sight of the promise when the attack came. Blaster fire erupted from the upper walkways. Not stormtroopers this time. These were mercenaries, Trandoshans, Weequays, and humans in mismatched armor. Their weapons professional and their aim deadly. "They found us," Lyra yelled, drawing her blaster and returning fire. Koth and Var didn't draw a weapon. He simply moved. His lightsaber, a brilliant blade of emerald green, snapped to life with a distinctive snap hiss. He became a whirlwind of motion, deflecting blaster bolts with impossible speed, sending them ricocheting back to strike the attackers. He was a dancer in a storm of lethal energy, every movement fluid and precise. Kaelen and Lyra provided covering fire, but they were pinned down. A Trandoshan fired a rocket launcher. With a gesture of his hand, Koth froze the projectile in midair, his face a mask of concentration, before hurling it back toward the walkway, where it exploded in a ball of fire. But for every mercenary they dropped, two more seemed to take their place. They were being overwhelmed. "We cannot reach your ship," Koth called out, deflecting a volley of shots. "We must find another way." It was then that a new ship descended from the chaotic traffic lanes above. It was a sleek, modern shuttle, its lines sharp and aggressive, painted in the gray and black of the Imperial remnant. It hovered, its ramp descending. Standing at the top was the scarred commander from Port Talon. At his side stood a figure that made Kaelen's blood run cold. She was a woman, tall and severe, dressed in the black robes of the Imperial Security Bureau. Her hair was pulled into a tight silver bun, and her eyes were chips of ice. But it was the object on her belt that held Kaelen's gaze. A lightsaber hilt, crafted from polished chromium. "The Jedi Ranger," the ISB woman said, her voice carrying an aristocratic chill. "Koth Navar, a prize indeed, and the lost lieutenant. You have caused us a great deal of trouble." She ignited her lightsaber. The blade was not the fiery red of a Sith, but a cold, unsettling white, like bleached bone. "Inquisitor Valerius," Koth spat, his stance shifting to a defensive Form 3. "The Moff's lapdog. I should have known he would send his pet witch." Inquisitor Valerius, sister to the Moff, Kaelen realized, smiled, a thin, predatory expression. "Surrender the data, and your deaths will be swift." "Never," Koth said. The Inquisitor leaped from the ramp, her white blade clashing against Koth's green in a shower of sparks. The fight was terrifying to behold. Koth was a master of defense, his movements economical and grounded. The Inquisitor was a flurry of aggressive, acrobatic strikes, her style a brutal amalgamation of Jedi forms and Sith aggression. Lyra grabbed Kaelen's arm. "This is a losing battle. We have to go." "We can't leave him," Kaelen protested. As he spoke, he saw Koth falter. It wasn't a physical blow. The Inquisitor had disengaged, holding out her hand. From within the shuttle, a low, resonant hum began to emanate. It was a sound that seemed to vibrate in Kaelen's very bones, a frequency that felt wrong. Koth cried out, stumbling to his knees. His lightsaber flickered and died. The confidence, the grace was gone from his face, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated horror. What is this?" he gasped, clutching his head. The Force, it's gone. It's silent, the Inquisitor laughed. A taste of the future, Jedi. A galaxy without your witchcraft. Kaelen understood. The Eidolon wasn't just a ship. Its technology could be miniaturized. That shuttle contained a portable version of the resonator. While Koth was incapacitated, the scarred commander and his troops moved in. Lyra fired, taking down 2, but a stun bolt caught her in the back. She collapsed, her body going rigid. Kaelen raised his blaster, but a powerful force slammed into him, pinning him against a cargo crate. The Inquisitor stood over him, her white lightsaber pointing at his throat. "The data, Lieutenant," she purred. Helpless, Kaelen watched as the commander ripped the data chip from his pocket. He watched as Koth and Var, broken and defeated, was dragged away in force-suppressing binders. He had failed. He had lost the data, he had lost the Jedi, and he had doomed Lyra. As a stun blast consumed his consciousness, his last thought was of the silent, screaming void that had swallowed Koth and Var's connection to the Force. It was a silence more terrifying than any explosion. Part 3. The Ashes of Hope. Kaelen awoke to the smell of ozone and the cold grip of Dura steel. He was in a cell, featureless in gray. Through the energy field of the door, he could see Lyra in the opposite cell, slowly stirring. Of Koth and Var, there was no sign. The Imperial shuttle had delivered them to its mothership, a Vindicator-class heavy cruiser, the Iron Fist, flagship of Moff Valerius's personal fleet. They were in the heart of the beast. Hours, or perhaps days, passed in a blur of interrogations. The scarred commander, who introduced himself as Commander Krell, was efficient and brutal. He asked questions about New Republic fleet deployments, about intelligence operations, but his primary focus was on the Resolute spirit. Had they transmitted the data? Did anyone else know? Kaelen, drawing on a strength he didn't know he possessed, said nothing. He was a communications officer. He knew about information compartmentalization. He gave them nothing but his name and rank. Lyra, when they dragged her back, was bruised but defiant. "They think you're a spy," she croaked through split lips. "They think the New Republic sent you to steal the Eidolon." "What about Koth?" Kaelen asked, his voice hollow. Lyra's face darkened. "They took him to a special detention block for high-value force-sensitive assets. I heard the guards talking. They're taking us to Valerius's secret shipyard. The Eidolon is there." Despair threatened to consume Kaelen. They were prisoners, their mission a catastrophic failure. The data was in Imperial hands. The Jedi, who was their only hope, was captured, and they were being delivered to the very man who wanted to unleash his terrible weapon. It was during a lull in the interrogations that a tiny, almost imperceptible sound reached Kaelen's ears. A series of clicks and whirs. It was coming from the ventilation duct. He pressed his ear to the grate. It was binary. A droid, R3's signature. Hope, fierce and sudden, flared in his chest. The astromech had somehow followed them, stowed away on the shuttle, or infiltrated the cruiser. Kaelen tapped back on the duct, using a basic New Republic code he'd used for shipboard communications. "R3? Status?" The droid whistled back softly. "Asterisk, I am undetected. I have accessed the ship's low-priority systems. I can unlock your cell, but the security patrols are heavy. I have located the Jedi, Detention Block D, Cell 7. His life signs are weak." A plan, desperate and insane, began to form in Kaelen's mind. He was a slicer. His battlefield wasn't a starship bridge. It was the digital heart of a machine. This cruiser was just another machine, albeit a terrifyingly large one. "R3, can you get me a data spike and access to a terminal? Any terminal?" A moment later, a small panel near the floor of his cell slid open, and a standard data spike was pushed through. R3 had used the maintenance ducts. Kaelen pocketed it. "Lyra," he whispered across the corridor. "When I give the signal, be ready to run." "What are you planning?" she whispered back. "I'm going to do what I do best. I'm going to talk to the ship." Their opportunity came during a shift change. The guards were distracted. Kaelen gave the signal. A moment later, the energy field on his cell fizzled and died. He scrambled out, using the data spike R3 had provided to short-circuit Lyra's cell door. They moved like ghosts, following R3's whispered binary directions through the sterile gray corridors. They avoided patrols, ducking into alcoves and service closets. Finally, they reached a deserted maintenance room with a computer terminal. "Keep watch," Kaelen told Lyra, plugging the data spike into the terminal. His fingers flew across the keypad. This was his element. The Imperial firewalls were formidable, but they were designed to keep out military slicers. Not someone who had spent 5 years in cryosleep with nothing to do but run decryption algorithms in his head. He found a backdoor, a vulnerability in the internal comm system. He didn't try to take control of the ship. That was impossible. He just needed to create a distraction. Team, he hacked the ship's public address system and every comm link on the bridge. A voice, perfectly mimicking Commander Krell's, boasted through the cruiser. "Attention all hands! This is Commander Krell. We have been betrayed by Inquisitor Valerius. She is a New Republic agent. Apprehend her immediately. Shoot to kill." He then switched the feed to mimic the Inquisitor's voice. "Krell is leading a mutiny. All loyal crew, defend your Inquisitor. Arrest Commander Krell." Chaos erupted. Alarms blared. They could hear the sounds of confused shouting and distant blaster fire from deeper within the ship. "That's our cue," Kaelen said, pulling the spike. "Let's go get Koth." With the crew turning on itself, their path to Detention Block D was clearer. They found Koth in his cell, but he was a shadow of the warrior they had seen on Denon. He was curled on the floor, trembling, his eyes vacant. "The silence," he mumbled. "It's everywhere. I am blind. I am empty." The portable resonator had broken him. Lyra and Kaelen hauled him to his feet, supporting his weight. "R3, we need a way off this tub," Kaelen said. The droid whistled, projecting a map. The hangar bay was on the other side of the ship, but there was a secondary bay used for probe droids and maintenance shuttles much closer. They fought their way there, a chaotic running battle through the confused and battling crew. Lyra's blaster was a constant roar, and Kaelen used his own with a newfound desperate confidence. They reached the secondary bay. It was small, housing only a single, old Lambda-class T4 shuttle. "It'll do," Lyra grunted, shoving Koth up the ramp. Whine. They powered up the shuttle as the bay doors began to cycle open. Through the viewport, they saw the reason for the Iron Fist's presence. They were in a hidden shipyard, constructed inside a hollowed-out asteroid, and there, docked at the central pylon, was the Eidolon. It was larger than the schematics had suggested, a malevolent black dagger against the star-dusted void, its hull pulsing with a faint violet energy. As they shot out of the bay, ignoring frantic hails from the crippled Iron Fist, Kaelen knew they hadn't won. They had escaped. The Eidolon was still here, operational. Moff Valerius still had his weapon, and Kothenvar was a broken man. But they were alive, and they knew where the enemy was hiding. They had a location, and as the shuttle leaped into hyperspace, bound not for Denon, but for the Jedi world of Ossus, Kaelen made a vow. He would see this through. He would deliver his warning, not as a junior lieutenant, but as a soldier who had stared into the abyss and refused to blink. The first part of the war was over. The real battle for the soul of the galaxy was about to begin. Epilogue: The Gathering Storm. The Jedi Praxim on Ossus was a place of quiet beauty, a stark contrast to the industrial hell of Denon, or the cold sterility of the Iron Fist. Ancient ruins stood beside new, simple structures, and the air hummed with a life that Kaelen now recognized as the Force. It was a gentle, pervasive energy, and feeling it after witnessing the silence of the Eidolon was like breathing fresh air after nearly suffocating. They were met by a pair of Jedi apprentices who took the catatonic Kothan Var to the healing wards with urgent, concerned whispers. Kaelen and Lyra were brought before the Jedi Master himself. Luke Skywalker was not an imposing figure. He was a man of calm demeanor and thoughtful eyes that held the weight of the galaxy. He listened without interruption as Kaelen told the entire story, from the resolute spirit to Port Talon, from Denon to the Iron Fist and the shipyard. He showed Luke the data, the copy he had kept hidden in a secondary compartment of his boot, the original now in Imperial hands. When Kaelen finished, Luke was silent for a long time, his gaze turned inward. "The Eidolon," he said finally, his voice soft but firm. "We have felt disturbances, a sense of static on the edges of perception. We thought it was the natural chaos of a galaxy rebuilding. Now I understand." He looked at Koth being tended to by healers in the distance. "To sever a being from the Force, it is a violation I cannot fully comprehend." "What will you do?" Lyra asked. "We must act," Luke said, "but not with the blunt instrument of a fleet. Valerius would simply use the Eidolon and escape. This requires precision, stealth." He looked at Kaelen, a new respect in his eyes. "Lieutenant, your skills and your courage have been invaluable. And Captain Vance, your resourcefulness is legendary. I must ask for your help one more time." "You want us to go back," Kaelen stated, his stomach tightening, but his resolve firm. "I will gather a strike team of my most capable Jedi," Luke said. "We will infiltrate the shipyard and disable the Eidolon at its source. But we will need a pilot, and we will need someone who understands the weapon systems, who can find its core and plant the charges. You, Kaelen, are the only one who has studied the schematics. You are the only one who has felt its effects firsthand." Lyra let out a long sigh, then a slow grin spread across her face. "Well, I did say your information looked like a whole lot of trouble, and trouble is my specialty." She looked at Kaelen. "What do you say, Lieutenant? One more run?" Kaelen looked from Lyra's defiant grin to Luke Skywalker's steady gaze. He thought of Captain Voss, of the crew of the Resolute Spirit, of Kothan Var's shattered spirit. He was no longer a communications officer pushing flimsy in the quiet corners of the New Republic. He was a soldier in a new kind of war. He nodded. "I'm in." Days later, aboard a modified, stealth-equipped Gatrock 720 freighter provided by the New Republic, they made the jump to hyperspace. The ship, the Shadow's Gambit, carried Luke Skywalker, 2 other Jedi, a fierce Togruta and a calm Duras, along with Kaelen, Lyra, and R3. Kaelen stood in the cockpit, watching the blue swirl of hyperspace. The data for the Eidolon schematics was displayed on a screen before him. He had found it, the resonance core, the heart of the silence. He was no Jedi. He couldn't move objects with his mind or see the future. But he could read a schematic. He could find the flaw in the code. He could hear the ghost in the machine, and he would make it scream. The Gambit reverted to real space on the outskirts of the asteroid field. The hidden shipyard lay before them. The Eidolon still docked, a sleeping predator. Luke Skywalker ignited his lightsaber, its brilliant green blade a beacon of hope in the dark. "For the Force," he said, his voice calm, "for all living things." Kaelen checked his blaster, his data spike secure in his pocket. He met Lyra's eyes and gave a single, determined nod. The echo of their war was about to become a roar. Part 4, The Heart of Silence. The Shadow's gambit, its stealth systems humming at full capacity, drifted like a phantom towards the colossal asteroid. Inside the cockpit, the mood was tense, focused. Kaelen, his face illuminated by the schematics of the shipyard, pinpointed their entry vector. "The main hangar is too heavily guarded," he said, his voice low. "But there's a secondary maintenance conduit here, used for waste disposal and supply transfer. It's shielded to mask energy signatures." "It's our best bet," Luke Skywalker nodded, his gaze fixed on the malevolent shape of the Eidolon docked at the central pylon. "Then that is our path. We split into 2 teams. Kaelen, Lyra, your objective is the Eidolon. Infiltrate the ship, locate the resonance core, and plant the charges." He handed Kaelen a pack of high-yield thermal detonators. "The rest of us will create a diversion and draw their forces. We will confront Moff Valerius and the Inquisitor." Lyra checked the power pack on her blaster. "Just like old times, sneaking into a heavily fortified Imperial facility." "You sure know how to show a girl a good time, Skywalker." The Duras Jedi, Master Voss, spoke, his voice a calm, rasping tone. "The Force is clouded here. There is a numbness. Be swift. The silence it creates is a weapon in itself." The gambit settled into a dark crevice of the asteroid, far from the primary sensor arrays. The 2 teams disembarked into the cold, airless silence of the maintenance tunnel. With a final, determined nod, they split up. Luke, Voss, and the tug-rooted Jedi, Ayla moving with silent purpose towards the command center, while Kaelen, Lyra, and the quietly whirring R3 unit headed for the Eidolon's secondary docking port. The interior of the Eidolon was a study in Imperial austerity, but it was colder, more alien. The usual hum of a starship was absent, replaced by that same low, resonant thrum that had incapacitated Kothan Bar. It was a sound that vibrated in the teeth and bones, a physical pressure against the mind. "I hate this place already," Lyra muttered, her blaster held ready as they moved through the stark, gray corridors. "Feels like walking into a tomb." According to the schematics, the core should be at the center of the ship, protected by multiple layers of shielding, Kaelen whispered, consulting his datapad. "R3, can you access the internal network? We need to bypass the security doors." The astromech plugged into a wall terminal, emitting a series of anxious beeps. "Security protocols are extreme. I am detecting multiple internal scans. There is a dedicated AI monitoring for intrusions." "Just get us as far as you can," Kaelen said, his slicer's instincts taking over. He worked in tandem with the droid, finding backdoors and creating false system pings to mask their progress. It was a high-stakes dance of code and countermeasures. For every door R3 forced open, Kaelen had to erase their digital footprint. They were 2 levels down, navigating a narrow catwalk over a deep engineering shaft when the alarms finally blared. "They're on to us," Lyra shouted, firing her blaster down the corridor at a squad of stormtroopers that had rounded the corner. "It was only a matter of time," Kaelen yelled back, returning fire. His shots were more controlled now, precise. The frantic escape from Port Talon and the battle on the Iron Fist had forged him into a competent soldier. He was no longer just a communications officer. R3, meanwhile, located a service lift. This shaft leads directly to the core containment level. It is a straight shot. They fought their way into the lift, Lyra laying down covering fire until the doors sealed. The lift descended rapidly, the oppressive thrum of the resonator growing louder with every deck they passed. Meanwhile, in the shipyard's command center, all hell was breaking loose. Moff Valerius, a tall, gaunt man with a face like carved stone, watched the security feeds with cold fury. "So the Jedi have come, and they brought the ghost with them," He turned to his sister, Inquisitor Valerius, who stood with her white lightsaber already ignited. The Eidolon is our priority. Deal with them. The doors to the command center exploded inwards, shorn from their hinges by a powerful force push. Luke Skywalker stood in the doorway, his green lightsaber casting a serene, defiant light against the sterile gray of the room. Master Voss and Ayla flanked him, their own blue and yellow blades humming to life. Moff Valerius, Luke's voice was calm, carrying an authority that went beyond rank. The Eidolon's reign ends before it begins. Surrender. Surrender? The Moff sneered. You are in the heart of my power, Jedi. You are already defeated. Inquisitor Valerius launched herself forward with a shriek, her white blade a blur of motion aimed directly at Luke's head. He met her strike, the clash of their weapons sending a cascade of sparks into the air. The fight was immediately ferocious. The Inquisitor was fueled by a fanatical rage, her style a whirlwind of aggressive, killing strokes. Luke, in contrast, was a bastion of calm, his movements economical, his defense impenetrable. He was a rock against her storm. While they dueled, Master Voss and Ayla engaged the Moff's personal guard and the stormtroopers that flooded into the room. Blaster bolts filled the air, deflected effortlessly by the Jedi's spinning blades. Ayla was a dynamo of acrobatic fury, her twin Leku swaying as she moved, while Voss was a stoic, unmovable pillar, his blue lightsaber a precise and deadly instrument. The resonator is active at low power, Voss called out to Luke, his voice strained. I can feel it, dampening my connection. Luke knew they were on a timer. The longer this fight dragged on, the more the Eidolon's influence would weaken them. The lift doors opened into a cavernous chamber. In the center, suspended by powerful energy fields and connected by a web of thick conduits, was the heart of the Eidolon, the resonance core. It was a complex crystalline structure, pulsing with the same sickly violet energy they had seen on the hull. The thrum was deafening here, a physical force that made the air thick and hard to breathe. No guards, Lyra noted, her eyes scanning the room. They must be really confident in their door security. Or the radiation from the core is lethal to organic life over time, Kaelen said, checking his datapad. The shielding is containing most of it, but we can't stay here long. He pointed to the base of the core. There, the primary power coupling. That's our target. They rushed forward, but as they did, a series of heavy blast doors slammed down, sealing the chamber. From the shadows of the upper gantries, a figure dropped down, landing with a heavy, metallic thud. It was Commander Krell, his armor scorched from the mutiny on the Iron Fist, his face a mask of pure hatred. In his hands he held not a blaster, but a massive Z6 riot control baton crackling with energy. The Moff thought you might try this. Krell's voice was a guttural growl. He saved you for me. Lyra, plant the charges. I'll handle him, Kaelen shouted, raising his blaster. With what? Harsh language? Lyra retorted, but she didn't argue, darting towards the core. Kaelen fired, but Krell activated a personal energy shield, the blaster bolts dissipating harmlessly. The commander charged, his baton swinging in a wide, brutal arc. Kaelen barely dodged, the wind from the passing weapon ruffling his hair. He was hopelessly outmatched in close quarters. He backpedaled, firing again and again at the shield, looking for a weakness. There was none. Krell was a juggernaut. R3! The shield! Find its frequency, Kaelen yelled, diving behind a console as Krell's baton smashed it to pieces. The astromech whistled, extending its data probe and aiming it at Krell. A moment later, it beeped triumphantly. It had found the shield's modulation, but it had no weapon to fire. Thinking fast, Kaelen pulled out his data spike. It wasn't a weapon, but it was a conductor. As Krell lunged for him again, Kaelen didn't try to shoot. Instead, he threw the data spike like a dart. It passed through the energy shield and embedded itself in a tiny port on Krell's chest plate. 3 now. Overload his systems. The droid sent a powerful surge of data through the spike. Krell's shield flickered and died, his armor locked up, servos whining in protest. He was immobilized, if only for a few seconds. It was all the opening Kaelen needed. He raised his blaster, set it to maximum power, and fired a single, precise shot through Krell's viewport. The commander staggered, then collapsed to the floor, motionless. At the same time, Lyra slapped the last thermal detonator onto the power coupling. Charges are set. 10-minute timer. Let's go. In the command center, the battle was reaching its climax. Ayla had been knocked unconscious by a well-aimed stun blast, and Master Voss was being pressed back by the relentless stormtrooper fire, his movements slowing as the Eidolon's resonance field took its toll. Luke and the Inquisitor were locked in a fierce blade lock, their faces inches apart. You feel it, don't you, Skywalker? The Inquisitor taunted, her white eyes blazing. The silence growing, your power fading. Your weapon doesn't understand the Force, Luke grunted, pushing her back. It can create a void, but life always rushes back in to fill it. Hate cannot create anything. It can only corrupt. With a surge of strength that came not from aggression, but from a deep, unshakable peace, Luke broke the lock and disarmed her in one fluid motion, his green blade slicing her lightsaber in two. He kicked her legs out from under her, and she fell to the floor, defeated. He pointed his lightsaber at Moff Valerius. It's over! The Moff, however, smiled, a cold, triumphant smile. He gestured to a console. Is it? The core may be compromised, but the Eidolon's primary systems are already backed up. The data is what matters, and I've just transmitted the complete schematics to a secure location. My work will continue. You've won a battle, Jedi. You have not won the war. At that moment, Kaelen's voice crackled over Luke's comlink. Master Skywalker, the charges are set. We're heading for the Gambit. You have less than 8 minutes. Luke made a split-second decision. He couldn't let the Moff escape with the data. He used the Force to yank the console away from Valerius, smashing it against the wall. But the Moff was already moving, hitting a panic button on his wrist. The shipyard's self-destruct has been initiated, an automated voice announced. All personnel, evacuate. The entire complex shuddered. Explosions rippled through the outer sections. Voss, get Ayla to the ship, Luke commanded. He turned to secure the Inquisitor, but she had used the chaos to crawl away, grabbing a fallen stormtrooper's blaster and disappearing into a smoke-filled corridor. There was no time to pursue. Luke turned his attention to the captured Moff Valerius. You're coming with us. The escape was a chaotic race against time. Kaelen, Lyra, and R3 met up with Luke, Voss, and the unconscious Ayla at the Shadow's Gambit. Lyra didn't hesitate, sprinting for the cockpit and firing up the engines. As the freighter shot out of the asteroid, the Eidolon's core detonated. The explosion was silent in the vacuum, but magnificent. The great black dagger was consumed from within by a blooming flower of white-hot fire, its structure vaporizing in an instant. A split second later, the entire shipyard followed, the asteroid tearing itself apart in a chain reaction of blinding light and shrapnel. The Gambit was buffeted by the shockwave, but Lyra held the ship steady, pushing the engines to their limit until they were a safe distance away. In the cargo hold, Luke stood over the captured Moff Valerius. Kaelen stood beside him, catching his breath. He looked at the defeated Moff, then at the dissipating cloud of debris that was once the most terrifying weapon he had ever known. You may have the data, Kaelen said to Valerius, his voice firm, but you lost the prototype. You lost your flagship, and now the entire New Republic and the Jedi Order know your plan. We'll be ready for you. For the first time, the Moff's arrogant mask slipped, revealing the bitter frustration beneath. Epilogue, a new frequency. One standard month later, on Ossus. The air in the Jedi praxim was clean and filled with the sound of life. The distant chatter of students, the rustle of leaves, the gentle hum of the Force. Kaelen stood at the edge of the landing platform, watching the Stargazer's promise being refueled. Lyra had overseen its retrieval, and it now looked better than ever, with new hull plating and a tuned hyperdrive. Kothan Var was there too. He was still recovering, the mental scars from his encounter with the resonator deep. But the light had returned to his large black eyes. He was relearning to touch the Force, not as a roaring river, but as a quiet stream, finding strength in the silence he had once feared. The galaxy owes you a great debt, Luke Skywalker said, approaching Kaelen. Your courage and resourcefulness saved the Jedi Order from a threat we didn't even know existed. I just did my duty, Master Skywalker, Kaelen replied. But he knew it was more than that. He was no longer the man who had woken up in a derelict ship. The New Republic has debriefed you both extensively, Luke continued. They are acting on the intelligence you provided, hunting down Valerius's network. The fight is not over, but the tide has turned. Lyra walked up, slapping Kaelen on the back. So what now, Lieutenant? Going back to pushing flimsy in some quiet corner of the Republic? Kaelen looked at her, then at the promise, then out at the horizon of Ossus. He had seen the darkness at the edges of the galaxy. He had fought it. He couldn't just go back. No, he said, a new certainty in his voice. I think my skills are better used out there. The New Republic is vast, but it has blind spots. It needs people who can operate in the gray areas, people who can listen for the echoes. A slow grin spread across Lyra's face. I was hoping you'd say that. The promise could use a full-time slicer and backup pilot. The pay is terrible. The hours are worse, and you'll probably be shot at. A lot. Sounds like home, Kaelen said, smiling back. He was a ghost no longer. He was a whisper in the machine, a guardian in the shadows. The war for the galaxy was fought with many weapons, lightsabers, blasters, starships. But sometimes the most powerful weapon was a piece of information, carried by someone brave enough to see it through. As the twin suns of Ossus began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Kaelen looked toward the stars. His war was not the grand sweeping conflict of the rebellion. It was a quieter war, a war of information and shadows. But it was his war, and he was ready. The Stargazer's promise lifted off, turning its nose towards the endless, star-dusted void, carrying a smuggler and a slicer towards their next adventure, forever listening for the echoes on the edge of the outer rim.